many, much, a lot of, lots of. So these are very common and useful quantifiers. We use them quite often in everyday conversation. So in this lesson, I want to talk to you about, well, how to use these words as well as how they're different. And I think the one thing that I want you to be aware of is that they are not always interchangeable. That's very important. And I'll talk about that as we go through the lesson. So, well, one thing that they have in common is that you may use these words before a noun, or you could even use them without a noun. And I'm going to go into a lot of detail about all of this in just a moment. But if this is your first time here, I want to introduce myself. My name is Wes. The channel is Interactive English. It's all about trying to help you reach your fluency goals. If that's what you would like to do, please subscribe, turn on notifications so that you will learn about future lessons. So let's first talk about when you use these words and then follow it with a noun. And I'm going to break this part into three different parts. I'm going to talk about affirmative statements, negative statements, and then questions. So let's start with affirmative statements, and we'll begin with many and much. So you are going to use many with plural nouns, and you will use much with singular uncountable nouns. So I could say, well, maybe there is much concern on your part that you're not getting enough exposure to the English language, which is maybe why you're here right now. And you're in luck because there are many lessons to help you improve your English skills. And I just used much with an uncountable noun, much concern, and I use many with that plural noun, many lessons. But to be perfectly honest, I would probably say great concern instead of much concern, because when we're talking about affirmative statements, you're not often going to use much before the noun. It just sounds really formal. But the one thing you just need to know is whether or not the noun is countable or uncountable. I know that if you are in a conversation, you're not going to stop and think about, well, wait, is this a countable noun or an uncountable noun? You're just going to say one of these. And I think over time, as you continue to get exposure, you continue to read and listen, you'll be able to use these naturally without even thinking about it. But that being said, if you want to make sure and not really worry about it using an affirmative statement, well, then you could use a lot of or lots of, because you can use these quantifiers with either plural nouns or singular uncountable nouns. So, this is true that there are a lot of people who are trying to become fluent in English. And I really believe that in order to become fluent, it takes a lot of effort. So I just used it with the plural noun, a lot of people, and I also used it with that uncountable noun, a lot of effort. I could also say that I always try to give you lots of useful information to help you improve your skills. And well, because of that, like in this video, I really hope that there are lots of likes and comments. So again, I use lots of with information, which is uncountable, and I use lots of with likes and comments, which are both plural nouns. Now, again, in my opinion, I feel like when we're talking about these affirmative statements, I probably use a lot of most of the time. I will use many when talking about countable nouns. I already mentioned that you're not really going to use much. And just personally, I just don't use lots of, because it's pretty informal. If you're going to say a lot of or lots of, it is a little more informal. But with these affirmative statements, I probably use a lot of most of the time. That's just me. Now, let's talk about some negative statements. And again, when we're talking about negative statements, you're going to use many with plural nouns. You're going to use much with singular uncountable nouns. And you can use a lot of or lots of with either one. And I am probably going to say this again because this is important information. So plural nouns, I could say that, well, I don't have many contacts in my phone. I also don't have a lot of photos either. And I do not have lots of apps. So again, I use those with the plural nouns. Many contacts, a lot of photos, lots of apps. And really, the thing that you're learning is that my phone is a bit old and boring. It is an iPhone 6 Plus. I probably need a new phone. As for those uncountable nouns, I could say that I don't have much money in my wallet. I also don't have a lot of change in my pocket, and I don't have lots of hope that my financial situation is going to change. And well, that is a joke. I am hopeful, but just to give you that example of using them with those uncountable nouns, much money, a lot of change, and lots of hope. I think the same applies for the negative statements, that much and many are going to sound a bit more formal, and a lot of and lots of are more informal. And just to throw in my opinion, I think when talking about negative statements, I probably use all of them equally, especially like much, many, and a lot of. When talking about negative statements, I use all three of those. Again, I just don't really use lots of that often. Now, with questions, there is something that's a little different. And I really want to focus on how many and how much. So again, we're going to use many with those plural nouns and much with those singular uncountable nouns. And I could say, well, like, how many people have watched this video? I really don't know. You know, you're watching it right now. You can see how many people have viewed it. And I could also say, well, how much time is left in this lesson? I'm sure there are probably several minutes, so just stick with me. But the one thing that is different about this is that you cannot use a lot of or lots of instead of many and much. All right. So you really just need to think of those as like fixed phrases. How many, how much. With other questions, you can use them interchangeably. I could say, well, were there many children on the playground? Were there a lot of children on the playground? Or something like, does your teacher have much patience? Or does your teacher have lots of patience? So with other questions, you can use a lot of or lots of instead of much or many. But when talking about that amount, that quantity, and you're going to use how, you're just going to use that fixed phrase, how many or how much. There's also a difference with negative questions, because with negative questions, there's kind of an expectation as to what the answer might be. If I were to say, well, was this not what happened? It's almost like I expect what the answer is. So you're going to use many and much in negative questions when you're asking about a large quantity that you expect is probably not there. And you're going to use a lot of and lots of when, well, maybe there should be a large quantity of something and you think, well, yes, it might be there. So if I say, are there not many coffee shops in your neighborhood? It's like I'm expecting that the answer is probably going to be no. Or if I said, are there not a lot of coffee shops in your neighborhood? I'm thinking, well, yes, probably the answer should be yes, that there are a lot of coffee shops. Or I could say, didn't you drink much water? I'm expecting that the other person, well, probably didn't drink much water. And that is different if I ask, well, didn't you drink lots of water? That I'm expecting that the answer may be yes, that this person did drink lots of water. So keep that in mind. That is a slight difference between many and much, a lot of and lots of. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, you can use these without a noun as well. And I think this often happens when you're having a conversation and the noun is obvious. And both people or the group of people know what noun they're talking about. So if I asked a question like, oh, did you catch many fish yesterday? And you say, yes, I caught many. Right? I don't need to say fish because we know that the noun is obvious. Can I borrow some money? Somebody might ask, well, how much? Or perhaps, were there many people that came to the party? You say, yes, there were a lot. Or you could ask, was there food left over after dinner? And somebody might just say, lots. All right. So in this case, you're not going to say lots of. you would just respond with lots. If we're taking out that noun without the noun, you just say lots. There are also some other phrases with these quantifiers like, well, many of or much of, and you follow it with that preposition. You'll follow it with of if it comes before a possessive, a demonstrative, an article, or a pronoun. I always try to answer many of your comments, all right, before that possessive, or I have studied Spanish for much of my life, all right? That is, I think, a phrase that you will hear from time to time, much of someone's life. We can also use much along with a comparative adjective. And the reason for this is that it just makes the comparison, it makes it much stronger. I just used it right then, much stronger. So you could say like much faster, much better. And it's really just to emphasize that comparison. We can also use so with many or much. And this really just replaces very. So many, so much. There are so many different flavors of ice cream. Or somebody could say, I have so much work to do. And we could even use so along with much in that comparative adjective just to make even the emphasis even stronger. So much better. So much faster. And we could also use too with many and much. Too many, too much. It just means that something is more than necessary. There are too many people on this bus. Or something that I say from time to time, oh, I ate too much food. More than necessary. And then we could use, well, as many as or as much as. And these, well, there are several different uses, but the one I want to talk to you about is kind of just referring to a large quantity, like some kind of upper limit. So I could say something like, well, you can write as many comments as you like. Or something, well, that a person might say, it's pretty common. You can have as much food as you want. All right, so those are some useful phrases. So I hope that you learned a lot of information in this video, and I just realized every time I use them, like a lot of information. I told you these are very useful words, these quantifiers. We use them all the time in everyday conversation. So I really hope that you learned something new. If you did, please hit that like button, write to me in the comments. I always love hearing from you, and I will see you next time. So long.